This is geometry's review for the midterm for semester 1. We're looking here, I've done some calculations already, but for number 9, we know that ABC is 123 degrees. We know it's made up of two angles that add up to equal that ABC. If ABC is 123, then those two angles will add up to also be 123. So we collect our like terms, add our amount across to become 138, and we can divide to get an x value of 46. If x is 46, you've got to watch to be sure that you're answering the question. 46 will most likely be an answer on the midterm. You want to be sure you answer the question at the measure of angle ABD. The measure of angle ABD would be 2 times 46 plus 15, which comes out to 107 degrees. For number 10, we notice that the angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary. That means that the two angles are going to add up to be 90. So we're going to substitute in what we know about the measure of angle 1. We subtract it from the 90, and the measure of angle 2, its complement of 35 would be 55. For number 11, angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles. That means it's two angles that add up to 180. We substitute in what we know, we subtract across, and the measure of angle 2 is going to be 155. They would be considered complements. They are complementary angles. Number 12, angle A and angle B are complementary angles. Find the measure of angle A and the measure of angle B. So we see an expression that represents angle A, but we want to find out its actual measurement. So we're going to set up our equation to be two angles that add up to 90 because they're complements. So we plug in the values of our expressions, collect our like terms, subtract the 18, divide by the 5, and x is going to be 14.4. If x is 14.4, we're going to plug it back into the value of a, which is 4 times x. Then we're going to subtract 18. So we say 4 times x, and we subtract 18, and we get 39.6 degrees. Similarly to the value for b, x plus 36, to figure out we have 50.4. Together, those two angles add up to 90 degrees. 90 degrees is complementary. Supplementary is 180 degrees. On our next page, we see that the two angles add up to equal 180 because A and B are supplementary, so we write our equation for the measure of angle A and the measure of angle B to equal 180. Substitute in your value of x, or for your measure of A is 6x. X plus 5 is the value for angle B. Collect your like term, which is 7x. Subtract your 5. When we divide by 7, we know that 7 goes into 17 twice, with 3 left over. 7 goes into 35 5 times. So 7 times 25 is 175. Now again, 25 is going to be an answer on the exam, on the midterm. We want to be sure to answer the question, which is find the measure of angle A. So the measure of angle A equals 6x. So we're going to say 6 times 25 is 150 degrees. the measure of angle B is x plus 5. So we're going to say 25 plus 5 gives us 30 degrees. Together, those two angles add up to 180. Number 14, we know the given information says that ray xz, find ray xz, it bisects angle wxy. So that means it cuts this angle into two equal pieces. So we have 4x plus 15, and zxy is 9x minus 20. Since the ray bisects the big angle, we know that those two angles are going to be the same. So I have 4x plus 15 equals 9x minus 20. On the midterm, you'll have to decide, when you're given two values, are those two values equal to each other? Do those two values add up to 90? Do they add up to 180? You have to determine by the other information, what can you do with those two values? In this case, we see we have an angle bisector, therefore we know the two angles are going to be the same measurement. We set them equal, and we start to solve our algebra. Adding our 20 across. Divide by the 5, and x equals 7. When you're answering your midterm, 7 is going to be one of the options. But if you look at the work, it says find the measure of angle WXZ. WXZ. It's going to be this guy right there. So the measurement of WXZ is 4x plus 15. So 4 times 7 plus 15. 28. And 15 looks like 43. 43 degrees. I should also be able to plug my 7 into the other equation, which would be 63 minus 20, to also give me 43. It needs to be the same amount. It's the only x value that's going to make those two exactly the same. We look at number 15, and we see values for the angles. We have to start to determine what is the relationship between those angles. What can we do? You got a couple options. We know that this is a straight line, so all three angles are going to add up to be 180 degrees. So you could say 90 plus 2x plus 3x minus 10. All three of them add together to equal the straight line, which is 180. Another option, you see that this side is 90 degrees because it has the box in the corner. You have a straight line. That makes the other side equal to 90. So you could say that 2x plus 3x minus 10 equals 90. Add your 10 across. Divide by your 5. And we get 20 for x. 20 is going to be an answer on the midterm. You need to answer the question. Find the measurement of angle ABC. So the measurement of ABC equals 2x. So we're going to say 2 times 20, so we get 40 degrees. We're also going to find the measurement of angle ABD, or CBD, I'm sorry. CBD. So that's 3 times 20. 60 minus 10 is 50 degrees. Together, those two angles add up to equal 90. You can often check your work to be sure your answers are making sense. Question B. We look at this figure. We see BC, which is a ray. It's cutting this big angle into two parts. The question is, are those parts equal to each other? Can we equal these to each other? Or do we need to set it up a different way? When I look at this, I don't see that BC is a bisector. So the only thing I know for sure is that these two angles add up to this straight line. So they're supplementary. Some people call it a linear pair. They add up to 180 degrees. So collecting our like terms gives us 13x, gives us 24. Minusing 20 would give me 160, so this is 156. 13 is going to go into 15 once. With 2 left over, it goes into 26 twice. So now we know what x is, but they're asking us to find the measure of angle ABC. So the measure of angle ABC equals 5x minus 22. So 5 times 12 minus 22, that's 60 minus 22, which gives us 38. The measurement of angle CBD equals 8x plus 46. So we're at 8 times 12 plus 46. That gives us 96 plus 46. That's 142. Together, those two angles would add up to 180 degrees, which is what we planned on. The measure of one angle is 3 times the measure of its complement. What does complement mean? We're looking for two angles that add up to 90. So if one of the angles is unknown and the other angle is 3 times that amount, and they are complements of each other, then we know we have 4x plus 90. When we divide by 4, we get 22.5. That's just the value of x. That's the value of one of the angles. So the measure of angle 1 might be 22.5, and the measurement of the other angle, let's call it angle 2, is going to be 3 times that amount, which is 67.5. Together, they should add up to 90 degrees. Two angles form a linear pair, so you need to know what a linear pair is. The measurement of one angle is 8 times the measurement of the other. 8 times. They're a linear pair. That means that the measurement of angle, let's call it 3 and 4 this time. The measurement of angle 3 and 4 are a linear pair. That means they add up to 180 degrees. The measurement of one angle is 8 times the measurement of another. So one of the angles has a value, and the other angle is 8 times that value. That gives us 9x divide by the 9, and x is 20. So if x is 20, we're supposed to find the measure of each angle. We have the measure of angle 3 to be 20, the measurement of angle 4 to be 8 times 20, which is 160. So those two angles add up together to be a linear pair. One of the angles is 8 times that of the other. On the next page, we're looking at noticing that a conjecture, what our thought is about this statement, we recognize that it's false. Now we need to find a counterexample to show that it is false. So if this says all numbers are prime numbers, this could be rewritten as if a number is odd, then it is prime. Okay? And it tells us that this is going to be false. A counterexample is trying to find an odd number. Okay, we have to take that as being, we got to find an odd number, but we have to make the second part false. So pick an odd number, like 3, but 3 is prime. Pick a number, an odd number, like 5, but 5's prime. Okay, maybe all odd numbers are prime. Pick a number like 7, like 9. 9 is not prime, but it does match the requirement of odd. So 9 would be an counter example for this. 9 is odd, but not prime. 15 is odd, but not prime. 21 is odd, but not prime. There's many options out there. For part B, if the sum of two numbers is negative, then the two numbers must both be negative. Well, it's already written in the if-then form, so it's easy to see that we need to be sure that we take two numbers that sum is negative. Now, can we think of any examples that the two numbers aren't both negative? We know that the answer is false. Okay, so we need to find a counterexample. Okay, so we could pick -2 and +5. Well, I think I got to switch that. We're going to pick +2 and -5. Now we have two numbers that their sum is negative, but both aren't negative. Here's a similar question. This says that the sum of the measures of any two acute angles is the measure of an obtuse angle. So we need to think of two numbers that it would be considered acute, but when we put them together, they are not obtuse. Can we think of an example that is not obtuse? You think of like 50 and 60, those are two acute numbers, but they add up to 110 degrees. That's over 90s, so that's obtuse. If we think of two numbers, all right, the sum of the measures of any two acute angles. Well, we could say 30 degrees and 50 degrees. Their sum is 80 degrees. 80 degrees is acute. So the counterexample is going to be 30 and 50. That would be your counterexample for letter C. Write the converse of the conditional statement in if-then form. Tell whether the converse is true or false. If it is false, provide a counterexample. First of all, a conditional statement would be if an animal is a bird, then it is a parrot. Okay, they're saying that all birds are parrots. So our conditional statement, the one right here, is if an animal is a bird, then it is a parrot. The converse is going to be to switch those. If an animal is a parrot, then it is a bird. I believe the first one ends up being false because an animal can be a bird that's not a parrot. But the converse, if an animal is a parrot, then it is a bird, and that would be true. This says, tell whether the converse is true or false. The converse is true. So there's no need for a counterexample. Here we're going to name the property. We see that we have two segments and they're congruent to each other. They're exactly the same. We have reflexive property of, now you got to decide, is it congruence or is it equality? It's congruence because of the congruent symbol. If angle P is congruent to R, and angle R is congruent to angle S, then angle P is congruent to angle S. Notice that had three parts to it. It had P and R, it had R and S, then it had P and S. That's an example of the transitive property of congruence. Very similarly, we have segment TV, or segment RS is equal to TV, and TV is equal to AB, so that RS is equal to AB. That is transitive again. That's a property of equality. Now you could get away with calling that substitution. That would be completely fine. But this follows right to the definition of what transitive is. It has the three parts and the first is going to equal the last part, so typically we would call that transitive, but it would be fine to call that substitution. Here we have the measure of angle 1 equals 20 degrees. The measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is 180. Now we're going to turn this into 20 plus the measure of angle 2 equals 180. This here is substitution. Property of equality. It's substitution because you're taking the 20 and you're plugging it into the other statement. Substitution. Find the measure of each angle of the diagram. We know that all four of these angles goes all the way around and makes up a whole circle. We know all of them add up to 360. What we'll be looking at is either two angles side by side that are making up a straight line, but notice how they have different variables, so that's not helpful. The other option, when you have a gigantic X like this, is that the angles that are going in opposite directions, they are vertical angles. And we always know that vertical angles are the same measurement. If two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. So we can say that 5x equals 2 times x plus 42. We could distribute that through. Subtract the 2x. Divide by the 3. 3 goes into 8 twice with 2 left over. 3 goes into 24 8 times. So it goes in there 28 times. Then we come over here and see that 3y plus 1 equals 4y minus 12. So we have x is 28, and we have y, that is 13. Now when we plug our values in there, you should be able to notice that the two angles side by side, ones that you didn't use to make these values, they have to also be supplementary. So when you plug in 28, 5 times 28, well 5 times 20 is 100. And 5 times 8 is 40, so that's 140. When I plug in 13 here, I get 39 plus 1, which is 40. So 140 plus 40 adds up to 180. I was testing my answers to see if they were going to make the picture a realistic answer. We have opposite angles that are equal, and we have angles side by side, in this case, that make up a straight line that are supplementary. We take our picture. If this is a box down here, then we know that it adds up to 90 degrees. We see a gigantic X that is making angle this 50 degrees and the 6 50 degrees. They're vertical angles. So that's going to make this 40. Because together they have to add up to 90. Here we have 45 degrees, and it makes a gigantic X. So across from your gigantic X is another 45. So if this is 90 and this is a straight line, then this side has to be 90 also. So this is 45. Vertical angles would make that 45, which adds up to 90. And if this is 50, then this has to be 40. Because this would have to add up to 90. They all are going to add up to 90. So angle 1, the measurement of angle 1 is 40 degrees. The measurement of angle 2 is 45 degrees. Measurement of angle 3 is also 45 degrees. Measurement of angle 4 is 45 degrees. The measurement of angle 5 is also 45 degrees. And to finish up, the measurement of angle 6 is 50 degrees.